Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 16, Episode 89. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Wednesday, Steelers Nation. Dave, moving closer to Super Bowl 60 Radio Row underway. Already a couple of Steelers interviews. Kim Hayward's been a busy man on that circuit. Dave, how you doing?
All right, happy Wednesday, and I judging by things, it's not as busy out at the Super Bowl this week, is it? Or at least kind of what I've seen. I know it's not as sexy of a matchup. I guess this time, New England and Seattle. I still think it's going to be a pretty good game overall. But is that kind of the sense that you're getting? Is it's not the buzz and as widely covered as in the past?
The fanfare hasn't felt as intense. We'll see if that changes over the next couple days if some big storyline drops. So far, it feels like the players have not said anything that's made many waves. I don't want to divert too much from Pittsburgh. We had a lot of coaching staff news to talk about a crazy lawsuit against DK Metcalf and the Steelers. But what do you think is the main storyline of Super Bowl 60? What is the headline takeaway to preview the week?
Yeah, I guess that's a good question. I would say it's youth at quarterback in Drake May versus a revitalization, reclamation of Sam Darnold, I guess is where I would start. The other talking point I would say is you got two head coaches fairly. Well, Vrabel's obviously been a head coach before, but a reboot of him versus an up-and-comer in Mike McDonald. How quickly both those organizations were able to, as we talked about in the Seahawks, not so much from the bottom of the barrel with losing, because wasn't their biggest losing season like 7-10 or something like that most recently? But you did actually have the Patriots bottom out. A couple of seasons there. I think the cultures that both these head coaches have set is a kind of another storyline. And then really, I think the defense is on both sides of football. You got two very stout defenses. I think top in Justin net yards per passing attempt, and I think, even though it's only a storyline to maybe me and you got the top two adjusted net yards per passing attempt stat differential teams facing.
And who was one and who was two?
Let me pull that back up.
Seattle one?
Yeah, I think Seattle definitely was one. Let me pull up.
And how big of a margin between 1 and 2? I just wonder. Obviously, Seattle favorites in this one, which would track with your favorite stat about why they're the favorites.
All right. Seattle was a 2.8 differential. The Rams were 2.7 and the Patriots were 2.3. But if you want to look at offensive side, the Patriots actually had a better offensive number, tied with the Rams at 8.2. The Seahawks were close at 7.3, but the Rams had the best defensive number in the league at 4.5. So, and then the Patriots a little cushier at 5.9. So you got a really good Seahawks defense versus a probably about an average Patriots defense. Versus a Patriots offense that was obviously slightly better than the Seahawks, but it shouldn't be surprising that these two teams have made it this far and are indeed facing off in the Super Bowl.
I think the fact that we struggle a bit to find that top storyline indicates why maybe the Super Bowl has a little less fanfare than other ones. But I think the storyline, similar to what you said, that the first-round quarterbacks, the maybe conventional path of Drake May that stuck right away appears to be the franchise long-term option versus Sam Darnold, the journeyman who had to reinvent himself and play on 5 teams to get to this point. It's kind of an interesting contrast between those two journeys. And then the defensive-minded head coaches of Rabel and McDonald. And I still never got to the root of the last defensive-minded versus defensive-minded Super Bowl, but it's been a while. And so usually it's the offensive chess match, which whiz kid is going to scheme up the better play call in the big moment, the third down, the goal line, the fourth quarter game-sealing play. This one's more about that defensive chess match, but also who's going to be better on offense. And the Patriots' numbers suggest they're better offense than maybe we give them credit for. So just kind of think that that's an interesting contrast of the quarterbacks and then the similarities between the head coaches.
Yeah, I would agree there. So I still, the spread obviously I think has been hovering around 4.5 on this. We'll get our picks out there on Friday on this, but I feel this is going to be it feels like it's going to be a competitive game.
Yeah, hope so. That's always going to be the goal when Pittsburgh is not in it. I'm sure Steeler fans rooting for Seattle to win this one so the Patriots can't get their 7th Lombardi. But Dave, let's turn to the Pittsburgh Steelers and a lot of coaching staff news and updates. Before we talk about who we expect to be new hires and additions to this staff, let's talk about who do not appear to be coming to Pittsburgh, and that's a pair of Saints assistant coaches and Scott Tolzien, who was a candidate and viewed as a strong candidate for the OC job, and tight ends coach Chase Haslett. It appears that neither of them will be coming over from Baton Rouge to Pittsburgh. Tolzien and Haslett basically out of the running for the OC and tight end jobs, respectively. Little unclear exactly. Did they voluntarily withdraw or did they not get the offer for the job? And so they kind of pulled out to frame it a little more favorably to their perspective. But either way, Tolzien, who we both were excited about his potential OC, would have been a really big get, is going to return to New Orleans for 2026.
Yeah, I would have, and right out of shoot, I thought Tolzien had a chance to be the guy, and it kind of felt like it was potentially heading that way up until just a few days ago, and especially coming out of the Senior Bowl there. So I don't, do you turn down jobs like that? I mean, I suppose is usually I turned down the job because I wasn't going to get it,
Mm-hmm.
kind of aspect there. But just dealing in the facts of the matter. The facts of the matter are that it doesn't appear as though either of these two will be joining the Steelers staff under Mike McCarthy. They were easy dots to connect due to previous history with McCarthy, but. For whatever reason, they're not going to be on the staff now, and maybe in Tolzien's case, it's just lack of maybe overall experience. I guess even though former NFL quarterback, and look at me, I think he did obviously some good things with that young quarterback room down there with the Saints and all, but and he has the links to Kellen Moore there, obviously going into that job with the Saints. So we'll never know the rhyme or reason or the truth behind it. But if I were to guess, it was just the fact that they weren't offered the job.
Yeah, that seems so. I think on Tolzien's case, there could have been at least some mutual thoughts of this wasn't the perfect fit. Tolzien probably would want to go somewhere if he was going to leave New Orleans, which they have a good thing going there. They're certainly building in the right direction, winning 4 of their last 5 games last year. The more connection, as you said, from their time together in Dallas. But Tolzien probably would want to call plays. And I know he took the interview still knowing that he was not going to be the play caller, but you take it for the experience to be in that room. So when the next opportunity arises, you have some knowledge and you're familiar with the process and kind of what it's like. And from Pittsburgh's end, maybe they did want somebody more experienced, although I think Tolzien does have enough. He's been coaching since 2019 and 38 years old. You've seen a lot of young up-and-comers that are in these positions of OC in a non-play calling role. The lack of experience was not going to be maybe as worrisome as it might be if he was going to be in that main chair. So it's hard to say for sure on Haslett. One report said that he withdrew himself. Another report said that was all bunk and just agent spin. Again, we don't really know what exactly is truth and fiction here, but either way, those guys will stay in New Orleans.
All right. Before we move forward with going through the latest news and who potentially looks to be the next OC, I wanted to hit real quick back on Frank Cignetti and kind of all the the chatter that's come off that, people trying to parallel, I guess, by a report from Aaron Nagler. I don't remember how long ago it was with that, but the narrative right now seems to be, well, adding Frank Cignetti Jr. to the staff lessens the likelihood of Aaron Rodgers returning to the Steelers in 2026. Now, we obviously have been following through last year's process and the whole courtship of Aaron Rodgers. Several times where he would speak in public, and I believe on one of those, he actually name dropped Cignetti as being kind of an influential part of his history in the NFL.
Yeah, I forget. Maybe you can color in the information about the report about some bad blood between Rodgers and Cignetti. I didn't go down the rabbit hole of the Green Bay drama and how things kind of ended there. And there's some of the reported animosity that also existed between Rodgers and McCarthy that seems to either be overhyped or all water under the bridge. And so I don't think the hiring of Cignetti to some sort of senior, non-prominent role in the offensive staff is going to be a deal breaker for Aaron Rodgers when you have McCarthy, when you have James Campen, when you have the opportunity Pittsburgh could offer Rodgers. So I've only really seen Colin Cowherd, I think, try to make that big brain type of point, but I don't think it really follows through.
Evidently, he harkens back to a 2023 report from Aaron Nagler from Cheesehead TV. And by the way, those guys do a great job on that site. They're sort of, I guess you would, probably not to the same degree, but they're the Steelers Depot of the Packers, right? They've been around a long time. They do a lot of great work over there. A lot of stuff similar to what we do with covering the Steelers. And Nagler, I mean, obviously that's not a new name to me. I've seen him report stuff and all like that. But a report in 2023 from Nagler says that Rodgers was so upset with McCarthy's decision to replace quarterbacks coach Alex Van Pelt with Cignetti that everything had to be funneled through then backup quarterback Tim Boyle to Rodgers during the 2018 season. So this harkens back, even though it was a 2023 report, I guess it goes back 5 years earlier to 2018. He says, let's see, I think, and this is Colin Cowherd of all people that we're quoting here, I think the Cignetti hiring tells you that Mike McCarthy, this is very intentional hire by Mike McCarthy. Mike has staff leverage here, and I think what he's doing, what have his two hires been, Frank Cignetti and the O-line coach James Campen. I love the news out of Pittsburgh is an offensive improvement, so McCarthy is making his tweaks. I think this signals the end of Aaron. Well, if he did his homework, he would really know that James Campen is one of, boy, if you probably put a top 10 list of Aaron Rodgers' favorite people together, I would imagine James Campen would be way up there on that list. We've already kind of documented and gone over that. And then going back to just, I guess, last summer in his first meeting with the Steelers media during mandatory minicamp, Rodgers did shout out Cignetti. The quote there that we have on the site is, "There's something special about, obviously, this area. So many great quarterbacks are from Pittsburgh. I feel like Pittsburgh has been part of my career from the beginning, playing for Mike McCarthy for 13 years, having Tom Clements, depending on Tom or Tommy Clements, depending on how old you are, as my quarterback coach forever. Dom," he goes on to name Don Capers, Kevin Green, Darren Perry, Ben McAdoo, Frank Cignetti, Luke Getsy. I don't want to forget anybody, but a lot of Yinzers in my life. So, merely name dropping Cignetti, I guess it's a take it for what it's worth type thing, but it's hard to imagine if Aaron Rodgers had this long built up, I guess, thing against Cignetti, he probably wouldn't have dropped his name in that list of people there.
Yeah, and again, if you want to play the card, the thought would be there was that reported rift between McCarthy and Rodgers, and I don't know how real that was at the time, at the end of their tenure together, McCarthy getting fired midway through 2018, but either that either was overstated or they worked things out. The same could be true with Cignetti. So again, I don't think the hire of Cignetti is going to be the deciding factor that tells Rodgers I'm going to stay home or not play for Pittsburgh.
All right, I apologize to everyone for quoting Colin Cowherd.
Yeah, you'll get your 20 lashings for invoking his name on here. All right, Dave, let's talk about the coaching staff and the expected hires. Let's talk about the offensive coordinator hire that we expect to happen. It's not been confirmed, but it seems to be very much trending in that direction. It's kind of a latecomer, a new name that was talked about, reported this week, and now seems to be close to being the guy. Minnesota Vikings pass game coordinator and tight ends coach, a longtime tight ends coach in the NFL, and Brian Angelichio has been with Minnesota since 2022. And the question you always ask is there a McCarthy connection? Yes, of course there is. Those two worked together in Green Bay from 2016 to 2018, where Angelichio was the tight ends coach for the Packers. Also, Angelichio has his own Pittsburgh ties, coaching under Dave Wanstead from 2006 to 2010, again, mainly as the team's tight ends coach. So that has not been made official, but seems to be certainly tracking in that direction.
All right, so we check a lot of boxes there, right? University of Pittsburgh, and a link back to McCarthy. So this guy has been coaching, I think, since going all the way back to 1995, and then went to Ithaca College and coached there, University of Pittsburgh in 2006 as the offensive assistant tight ends coach, and then was full tight ends coach at University of Pittsburgh from 2007 to 2010. Went on to Rutgers, cut his teeth in the NFL with the Buccaneers in 2012, and has since been with the Browns, with the Packers, with the Commanders, with the Carolina Panthers, and with the Vikings since 2022. Is the speculation that he would his title in Pittsburgh would be offensive coordinator / tight ends?
I don't know. I guess that's a possibility, but you typically don't see somebody have that dual title. So I would assume they would still hire a true tight ends coach to work with those guys in practice. But Angelichio, in the same way that Arthur Smith had that tight end background and would occasionally pay extra attention to the tight ends. The one day where at training camp, Alfredo Roberts was unavailable for camp that day. Arthur Smith ran the tight end positional drills. You have that kind of background, but I would imagine you're still going to hire a dedicated coach on top of having Angelichio as your OC.
The good news is he does have a lot of experience with tight end rooms, right?
Yeah, that's really what he's been coaching since that job at Pitt in 2006. He was an offensive coordinator, not at the NFL level, not at the FBS college level, but at Ithaca, as you mentioned. He spent a decade there. I think it was 2000 to 2005. He was the OC. So there is some background in terms of just the role, although obviously at a much different level compared to the NFL, although Angelichio will not be calling the plays in Pittsburgh. It's still going to be Mike McCarthy, but a first-time OC at the NFL level in title, but he's been coaching tight ends since 2006. Those were all the roles he had in Green Bay, in Washington. He got the pass game coordinator title in Minnesota. It seemed a little undefined of exactly what that meant. He was asked one time, what exactly does that mean? What is your role as a pass game coordinator? And he didn't have a great answer for it and just said kind of whatever is needed on a given week, however else I can help. So kind of felt a little maybe ceremonial than it was truly a role, though maybe they kind of figured things out over the course of his time in Minnesota. Has kind of that very much Jeff Hafley path. Those guys actually coached together for a long time. I thought he might be a candidate for the Miami job whenever Hafley took it, but because they were together in Cleveland and in Tampa Bay. So his roots and kind of his coaching mentors, I would say, are Dave Wanstead, Greg Schiano. He got hired by Schiano in 2011 at Rutgers. And then when Schiano became the Buccaneers head coach, he brought Angelichio and Hafley to Tampa Bay in 2012 before getting fired. And then a lot of time with Kevin O'Connell, too. They worked together in Cleveland, worked together in Washington for 1 year in 2019. And then O'Connell, of course, hired him in 2022 to become the tight ends coach and pass game coordinator. So that's kind of his roots there. He's 53 years old. Again, first time coordinator at the NFL level, but has that deep background with tight ends, as you mentioned.
All right. So, I guess the expectation is that he could now be the guy by the end of the week, and probably maybe even as soon as today. And we'll obviously have to see what the official title is on that. What are the official names now? How many are we up to that the Steelers have actually made officially official?
I'd have to count. You're right. I thought, and egg on my face, I said on the Monday show they might wait until the whole staff is in place to announce all the hires, and then shortly after that, they announced half, I think 8 official hires so far, I believe is what they're up to in terms of what has been announced by the team. I don't know exactly who all those 8 are off the top of my head, but it's not any new names we haven't talked about. It's all reported names that were already discussed.
All right, here's what they have on the actual media side of the Steelers right now. Mike McCarthy, head coach. Patrick Graham, defensive coordinator. Jason Simmons as the defensive pass game coordinator / defensive backs. Scott McCurley, inside linebackers. James Campen, offensive line. Ramon Chin Young Sr. as running backs. Adam Henry as wide receivers. Jari Evans, assistant offensive line. Steve Scarnecchia, chief of staff. So I think that's where we're at. So as far as people under McCarthy, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, looks like 8 have officially been named.
Okay, so in the chief of staff role, just basically sounds like McCarthy's right-hand man, just in terms of any sort of assistance he needs throughout the week, logistics, practice schedules, anything he probably has to, that gets brought to him probably runs through Scarnecchia first.
All right. Now who are Angelico and who else are we kind of waiting on maybe of being made officially official?
Well, we could talk about the other reported hire that's soon to be is Domata Peko, the defensive line coach. That was one of the open positional groups that had not been filled. Whenever we talked about it on the Monday show, an important hire for this young defensive line, and about Kim Hayward's decision on whether or not to play in 2026. And it sounds like Peko, the former Bengals defensive tackle, who had great battles with Pittsburgh over his long AFC North career, is going to be coaching Pittsburgh now. He has spent 2024, I think, as a sort of intern with the Dallas Cowboys. He had a good connection with Mike Zimmer, who was the Cowboys DC that year, who coached Peko in Cincinnati. So it was a McCarthy hire, but it was kind of by proxy through Mike Zimmer. And then Peko joined Deion Sanders' coaching staff at Colorado last year and spent 1 year there. So it's one of the greener coaches to this coaching staff. He's not a super young coach. I don't think he's in his, 40s, but 2 years basically coaching either the NFL or college level, now coming to Pittsburgh to do the same. That's been reported, but I don't believe made official by the team.
Are you surprised the greenness, I guess, of him? Now you are, of course, dealing with a former player that played a lot of years in the NFL, but are you a bit surprised by going from someone like Carl Dunbar to Pecco?
A little bit. I didn't know if I had great expectations for exactly who the hire would be, and I think a staff should have a mix of more experienced coaches and some younger guys, and just to have that blend. And I think, to an extent, you're seeing that here, and certainly reflective in the Pecco hire. And it's going to be coaching a pretty young room too, a room that has to continue to develop and grow, one that has talent with Black and Harmon, showing flashes, and can Benton truly put it all together. So yeah, it's probably a little surprising because he's only been coaching, it seems like, for 2 seasons. Now he's gonna be running that room, in a room that really is important. You have to get right there. But if he's a quality coach, he's a quality coach. It's hard to really know, what that level of expertise is. But as you said, a guy that's played a long time, that knows AFC North ball and what that division is like, that's gonna be important. I know Colorado's run defense was bad last year, but I really put little stock into, 1 year coaching. That guy's not going to be able to probably control the outcomes too well in terms of who your guys, who's being recruited, and who's playing, all that kind of stuff. So I wouldn't necessarily freak out about Colorado's results last year and hold that against Pecco too much.
There's no known links between Pecco and Patrick Graham, though, right?
Not to my knowledge. I'd have to look at his career. Did he ever play anywhere other than
I mean, he played in Denver.
Cincinnati?
He played in Cincinnati. He played in where else? Baltimore for a season, and the Cardinals. I think his last season was with the Cardinals in 2020.
Only thing I want to check is Kyle Pecco, who I believe is related to Domata. Let me just try to double check that. He's the cousin. Did he play under Patrick Graham at all? He was with the Raiders in 2022. Kyle Peko was when Graham was the DC, so that's a very loose connection. But if you're squinting to find one, then I suppose that's one that you could point to there. Maybe Kyle's told Domata a little bit about Patrick Graham.
All right, that's a good pull.
So we'll see. It's an interesting hire, but it's good to have that perspective. I don't think just because you're a former player doesn't mean you're automatically going to be a good coach. But if you're somebody that can offer that perspective, I've been there and done that at a really high level at the NFL level, and fairly recently too, coaching. I think his last season in the NFL was 2020. That'll help, I think, translate to connecting with his young group. But again, it's a big hire. You got to get this right. This defensive line group really has to be unlocked.
All right, and I imagine Cameron Hayward and Peko know each other quite well throughout the years.
Yeah, playing against each other, does that sway Hayward's decision one way or another? I doubt it, but it probably doesn't hurt. That it's probably a familiar face. I know Hayward's been on the Radio Row tour starting yesterday. I think he's on Rich Eisen later today. Still leaving his future up in the air, but it sounds like, and we are kind of over our skis trying to get into his head and heart here, it sounds like he's leaning towards playing. Kind of talked pretty openly about the McCarthy hire for the first time and seemed to be excited and rejuvenated by it. And the way he was talking about the hire and just kind of his future seemed to indicate he'll be back for one more year at least.
All right. I would agree with you as far as 30,000-foot analysis based on what he has said so far. We'll see if he reveals any more. You said today on Rich Eisen, so that ought to be fairly entertaining. Rich does a pretty good job there. Maybe he'll come right on out and ask him again if he intends on playing in 2026. But with the big chunk of Hayward's money being tied to I believe a middle of March roster bonus this year, we should definitely have our answer on Hayward's future by then, you would think.
And Hayward talked about McCarthy's connection to Pittsburgh and love for Pittsburgh's a really big positive. And apparently Hayward was neighbors with McCarthy's brother at some point, which is a kind of crazy small world connection there. And Hayward also referencing, McCarthy's won a Super Bowl. And that's, of course, a thing that Hayward has been chasing. And I know that was a long time ago with McCarthy and his own playoff resume. The last decade has not been impressive, but I think that was a notable comment from Hayward because he wants to make a Super Bowl push, and McCarthy's at least got one ring to show that he's capable and knows the path to get there.
All right, and if Hayward does return for 2026, odds are fairly good that this would be his final season, right?
Probably, but he's still playing at a level where he could seemingly play for more than just one more season. He's been on record years ago saying he wanted to play through 2026 and play out this current contract. One question will be, will he look for another contract adjustment or tweak? And that's a whole nother discussion we may be having in the summer. But it'd be reasonable to think that 2026 is his last year. But again, I don't want to close that door because of his play. And you look at Aaron Rodgers, we thought maybe 2025 be the last year. And here we are talking about one more go around potentially.
Did the Steelers make Tom Arth official yet? Because
was he one of the 8?
No, he was not one of the 8 I read off there. Let me see if he's on at the actual Steelers site. I read off of the media site. I'm trying to remember if I
thought I saw something official somewhere, but maybe I misread or misinterpreted something. But I thought I saw him pop up.
He's listed on the team website as the coaches, under the coaches. So maybe they just haven't added him to the media side.
Okay, but I think it's a pretty safe bet. Tom Arth will be back as this team's quarterback's coach for 2026. I think that's it on the reported hires, except for a couple more, and this is a little more in the weeds. The strength and conditioning staff seems to be pretty much filled out. They are retaining one holdover from 2025 in Justice Galak, an assistant strength and conditioning coach who was with Pittsburgh first in 2021, and then I think came back after a stint at Temple for the 2024 season. They also have one other outside reported hire in Abe Munnayer, who was a sports performance coach, I believe, at San Jose State. I don't know if there was a connection to McCarthy or not. I don't think there was, at least not overtly, obvious, but he's been a long time S&C coach at Stanford, at Cal, San Jose State, and now making his way out east to Pittsburgh.
Okay. All right. So when we're still waiting on the official reported Danny Crossman being the special teams coordinator, CJ Ayu being the outside linebackers coach, Peko we just hit on, and Angelichio, right?
Right.
What would be left outside of that potentially?
Tight ends coach, any potential assistants, assistant special teams coach, you would expect to happen. You'd probably get at least one more defensive backs coach in there. Usually it's not just one guy. Right now, Jason Simmons holding that title. You're probably going to get a second guy there, and you may get a smattering of other assistants for McCarthy's staff, especially on defense.
And maybe a special teams assistant?
Yeah, like I said, yeah, you're gonna not guaranteed. Danny Smith again, one man band. We talked about that, but most teams, I think Pittsburgh again, the only team in the NFL previously to only have just one title of a special teams coordinator. So you would expect at least one. Some teams even have two, but I would expect at least an additional hire for McCarthy there.
All right, how is this shaping up size wise? And Alex, the age old question: does size matter?
I've been trying. Whenever I write those articles, I always know there's the implication there of that. So way to make this more awkward for me here. We'll see exactly.
You're 30-something years old. You're still blushing on the other end.
I'm so bad. You can read me.
I remember when you were a teenager when you came on board here, were you?
No, I wasn't that young, but early 20s.
Okay. All right.
Anyway, let's speed past that and get to the heart of the question. We'll have to see. I mean, some people are trying to say the coaching staff is a lot larger right now. I mean, it's not yet, but it's going to probably end up being larger than Pittsburgh last year, which by my count was just 19 coaches, the smallest coaching staff in the NFL. So McCarthy's coaching staffs were about average compared to the rest of the NFL, about 23, 24, somewhere in that range. And that's probably where it's going to end up for Pittsburgh in 2026. So, we've done a lot of studies on yearly studies on Pittsburgh's coaching staff size, and it's basically been one of the smallest, if not the smallest, in the NFL. But I've found there is no strong correlation between a larger coaching staff and team success versus a smaller coaching staff and team failure. It's really about getting the right hires and the right coaches and having those guys work and mesh together. But to answer the question, you're probably going to end up about what McCarthy had in Dallas of, I would guess, 23 on staff.
All right. And what are the sizes of the Seahawks and Patriots staffs?
I can try to
Did you just research that or loosely?
Yeah, let me pull up my study from 2025, and because I haven't done the 2026 edition yet, obviously, and won't do so until late in the offseason when all coaching staffs kind of get settled in. Let me see what I had for 2025. This is the coaching staff sizes as of July, so right before training camp opened. Seattle had 25, and the Patriots had 23. The league average in 2025 was 24, so Seattle was just above and New England just below.
And where does it look like the Steelers are at right now?
I haven't even counted because I know they're going to keep adding. So they're not at, I mean, the number they're at right now is not large because they're not done filling out the coaching staff, and assistants are going to bring up that number. So they're probably at, I mean, they have 8 official, probably another 7 that haven't been reported yet, or maybe even less. So they're probably sitting at like 15, 16 right now.
All right. And what was the Steelers' size this past season, 2025?
19, which was the smallest in the NFL by far. Every other team had at least 21 coaches on staff. Now, I think in my studies, I don't include the strength and conditioning staff. I don't include necessarily some analytics people. I don't know if I'd even include Scarnecchia because I'm looking at just like on-field coaches is how I do this study. And I understand that every coaching staff, or at least some of them in Pittsburgh, has been an example of this in the past with, Ryan Shazier and Vince Williams doing some sort of work. There are some coaches who just aren't listed by the team on staff. And so those are hard to really factor into the study. I take it off of what's officially listed by the team. And so while Pittsburgh may have actually been, 20 or 21, I'm sure every other team probably had 1 or 2 guys that weren't officially acknowledged on staff in the media guides. So it all kind of washes out there. But Pittsburgh certainly has had one of the smallest coaching staffs for years now, and that'll probably change under McCarthy. They'll probably be about average across the NFL.
All right. We know that Eddie Faulkner will not be back, obviously, and we know, I think, where he will be in 2026.
And he's not that far away. He'll be heading to Baltimore to join the Ravens as their new running backs coach. As I think Jesse Minter, the new head coach over there, putting together a really strong coaching staff. And so Faulkner joining a division rival.
And you kind of saw that one potentially coming once the new offensive line coach was hired.
Yeah, that was my thought whenever Dwayne Ledford was hired by Baltimore for the offensive line role. He's one of the best and most well-respected coaches in the NFL, was in Atlanta, but then got swapped out by the new coaching staff there as they brought in Bill Callahan, who's also one of the best O-line coaches. That made Ledford a really hot name as a free agent and picked up by the Ravens. And the connection there, my thought about Faulkner joining Ledford was because they coached together at NC State in 2016 through 2018. So that synergy of running backs coach and offensive line coach would work well. And Faulkner, I think, has done a really good job. One of the better coaches Pittsburgh has had in terms of the assistants. Obviously, Jalen Warren wanted him back, did well with Warren and Gainwell, and I thought did just a fine job with Najee Harris as well. So it's a really good hire by Baltimore.
All right. And remember, rolling back to our conversations about Minter before, when we were going through candidates, we were saying there was a lot to like about Jesse Minter, but we did kind of question because of him basically being a hardball tree guy and not much exposure out of that, with obviously two hardballs in the league as head coaches. What we wondered if one of the weaknesses might be, or one of the worries about him, was his ability to put together a coaching staff. And at least on paper right now, it looks like he's answered those questions with flying colors, right?
Yeah, I think he's doing a good job over there. Obviously, proof will be in the pudding, but they got Declan Doyle, a real up-and-comer, as the OC, and then what is Anthony Weaver as the DC, correct?
Uh-huh.
Who, of course, was a finalist and strong candidate for the Steelers job. And so for Weaver, who's been, a DC, and to be there with Minter, who's a defensive mind, is a little surprising. But of course, Weaver going to where he played in Baltimore and coached for a time. So I think Minter's putting together a really good coaching staff.
All right, I would agree there. So, maybe a lesson learned here that, these guys have connections, and even if they seem faint because of maybe a relationship to one coaching tree or branch or whatever last name, in that you still put together good staffs.
Yeah, and I would just say last thing on the Faulkner situation, it really magnifies how well Ramon Chinyong can do as the running backs coach, which I think is still kind of viewed as the most curious hire, and we'll see how it goes as somebody who does not have that clear running backs coach background. And so if there's some sort of struggle there, it's of course tough to judge these positional coaches sometimes and what their influence is and isn't, and what they're teaching and how that manifests on the field. But if the running back room does struggle for whatever reason, if the Ravens continue to shine, which you imagine they would with, Derrick Henry still running strong, but that'll just kind of magnify the decision to let Faulkner go and to bring in Chin Young all the more.
All right.
All right, that should cover things for the coaching staff pretty good, and hopefully have the Angelichio hire finalized by the time we talk on Friday. I've already kind of done a little bit of research on his background, and we'll do kind of one of those big book articles on Angelichio. Had that one on Patrick Graham go up Tuesday. I don't know if you read that, Dave. Any other kind of final thoughts on the Graham hire?
No, I thought you did a great job on that. I think, however, that a lot of the things that we covered during the breakdown, what did we spend 15, 20 minutes on that with Graham? I think you sussed them out even deeper. And I thought it was interesting. I guess from Brazil or Mexico, whatnot, somebody in Steelers Nation, one of those sites or blogs or whatnot, had someone at the Super Bowl, and Robert Spillane was on the podium, I guess the other night, and he spoke, even though it was a short response, spoke very glowingly of Patrick Graham, having played for him in Las Vegas with the Raiders. Called him a defensive
True savant.
a true savant. So that was, you don't throw around the word savant. You don't hear that quite regularly out of an NFL player's mouth. So that was good to hear.
Yeah, it was, and that's a Yale grad, so no surprise that Graham has that really good IQ overall, and he really probably helped Spillane because Spillane got
Mhm.
the bag this offseason, a $33 million extension. So what did he sign with the Raiders whenever Spillane signed with Las Vegas in 2023? What was that contract? What was the total value on that? I guess it would have been a 2-year deal.
Let me see if I can find that out here. It was a 2-year deal with him, not much of anything it doesn't look like in totality because his base salary was like 1.4 and 1.8, so 3.2, 3.3,
I'm
signing.
seeing $9 million total, or at least a max, according to one report. Does
Yeah, it
that look
might have been a
accurate?
max. Yeah.
So he went from 9 million in Las Vegas, and then despite being older, 2 years later got a $33 million deal with New England, and is now obviously playing in the Super Bowl. So you can probably not obviously put it all on Patrick Graham, but Patrick Graham furthering that development to get Spillane a really big contract that is honestly life changing.
Right. I would agree.
So yeah, good to hear that from Bob Spillane, and one of those good guys that undrafted free agent, climbed the ladder, special teams demon in Pittsburgh, and now will be starting in the Super Bowl. Really kind of cool career arc for Robert Spillane. All right, Dave, where to from here? The Pro Bowl games took place yesterday. The flag football game took place. I think, again, I was so out of touch with the Pro Bowl. I think I even said on Monday's show the wrong date of when it would take place. I think I said Thursday. It was yesterday. Obviously, the NFL honors are Thursday. It just kind of shows that I don't care about the Pro Bowl. I don't think you care about the Pro Bowl. I don't think anyone cares about the Pro Bowl. I don't even know who won. The NFC, I think, won. It was like 60 something to 50, but Skronik was there. I don't know if he did do much in the game. I did not watch the game, clearly.
I didn't watch it. I was busy
Okay.
with other stuff and all. I know George Pickens was, I guess, the offensive MVP. So there's that. But you only had one member from the Steelers there in Ben Skowronek, and mostly I just pay attention to those normally more in depth if there's more Steelers there because of any interviews they might give, or God forbid somebody gets injured. You know.
Which I don't really think either happened. Thankfully, no injury, and I think Skowronek was mic'd up, and the Steelers site did a couple fun things with him, but there were no takeaways from the Pro Bowl and the Pro Bowl games.
No, no. Let's see. Roger Goodell had his State of the Union a couple of days ago. Nothing really came out of that. I thought the more interesting conversation or press conference was the NFLPA one yesterday, which, in case you missed it and you are into that kind of stuff, it is up on YouTube. If you go to the NFLPA YouTube page, props to them for airing that in its entirety and putting it on the site, whereas the NFL, I don't think, has released a version of Roger Goodell's press conference. They did touch on a few things that we wondered about the 18 game season. I think Goodell, briefly did as well too. My main takeaway here, and it's an obvious one when it comes to the NFLPA side, that says, look, nobody, we're an 18 game season is not something that we want to do. However, and this is me not paraphrasing, but interjecting here. This is a huge, it's going to happen, right? The NFL at some point, probably as part of the next CBA, is going to go to an 18 game season, right?
It seems inevitable.
All right. This is a huge bargaining chip on the NFLPA's side, that, along with revenue share and the typical things that come along with a new CBA, they better damn sure do a good job of bargaining with. In the last couple of CBAs, in my opinion, they haven't done a very good job bargaining at all. But this, obviously, with an 18th game being a huge bargaining chip, they better use it very, very to their advantage as much as possible, because it's going to happen. And barring any kind of them locking out on either side, in other words, they better get what they can get this time, and I would imagine getting what they can get would involve a second bye week being put into the NFL season. I would imagine more jobs, meaning 53-man roster, potentially maybe going to something like 56. Practice squad size going even higher. And then, obviously the other things like revenue sharing and protection and, everything related to that. Now, they were asked about fields and all like that, grass surfaces and acrisure and all like that. It sounds like they would like a more standardized playing surface to play on, and you can't fault them for that, especially when you have the likes of MetLife and the track record that has for serious knee injuries, and then all of the, I guess, the rigmarole about kind of grass surfaces like we've seen at times with Acrisure Stadium. So they better use that as a strong bargaining chip this next time around and make it where you have a more standardized playing surface of grass across the NFL in all 32 stadiums.
Well, I don't know if they're gonna get their wish for that. The NFL did finalize a program in December that's gonna have a standardized set of requirements for each field, grass or turf, and that has to be implemented by 2028. I don't know exactly what that criteria and those requirements will be, but they're gonna all have to adhere to kind of the same standard of care, which is shocking it's not already been in place for this multi-billion-dollar organization to kinda let each field kind of be their own unique and just assuming the teams can handle it themselves. But obviously, Acrisure has come under criticism, especially after that Week 6 game against Cleveland, where the field was a complete mess. The hash marks were just dirt, essentially. Miles Kilbrew tore his ACL. He wondered if the field conditions contributed to that. And so, I don't. Again, they're still going to be turf and grass is not a requirement by the NFL to use just one type of field, but there's going to be some sort of program in place to, I guess, modernize and make sure everyone's at sort of a baseline level by 2028.
Should they have a standardized grass field, though, in your mind? And I know it's tough when you got these
Yeah, that
you
just makes it harder. I mean, I'm a proponent of grass, and I think virtually every player is too, so I wouldn't mind it. But I just wonder logistically how difficult that might be to impose that as a mandate for every single team to have grass fields.
It's going to be interesting. I think an element, the last couple of Super Bowls, haven't there been kind of things about players slipping and all like that? In seems like that was a talking point. I don't know, either the last Super Bowl or the last couple. I don't know for sure, but I guess where I'm going at here is, what happens if you get into a pregame situation and you know there should there should be representation on both sides, and perhaps there is. I haven't dug down into this. What if you show up on game day and the field does just not meet specifications for both sides? You know,
Well, I think it's something that can be examined and can be questioned. I think you've seen some cases of that, although this is not totally applicable to what you're talking about. There's a couple of those Hall of Fame games have been canceled because of poor field conditions, where they've come out and they've looked at it and said this field is not right and we don't want to play on it. Now, of course, you couldn't cancel a regular season game, and so I don't know how all that gets handled. But hopefully, this program of by 2028 of having every stadium meet some sort of certain baseline requirements for the condition of the field, then that'll solve that. Now, what happens if you're in 2028 and some field does not appear to be up to that standard by, a Week 7 game where the field speed up in Pittsburgh? Pittsburgh's unique because you're seeing most of these cold weather teams now build stadiums with domes and retractable roofs. There are going to be very few open air stadiums in the next couple of years. Pittsburgh's going to be one of the few. They, of course, share the field with the Pitt Panthers, and you have the Whitfield Championships that take place late, November, whatever it is, every year. That really beats up the field pretty good. They do the saw change after that, but still, this Pittsburgh has kind of unique challenges in that, so they may have a tougher time being consistent in that field of care, but they have to. That'll be the mandate by 2028.
do you think like by, I don't know, 10 years from now, all teams will be playing in some sort of roofed retractable type venue?
Most. I think Pittsburgh's going to be a holdout. Now, I guess the question becomes, when will Pittsburgh's next stadium be built? And I think the tea leaves from Art Rooney is the lease is up in 2030. They're going to plan to renew the lease for the stadium and not build something new. So how long will that lease go for? Will it be 30 years the first lease was? I don't know if it's going to be that long, probably be something shorter, but I would imagine Pittsburgh's not having a new stadium change within 10 years, so they'll be at least still outdoors.
Part of the attraction over the years, obviously, are these games in December, January, with the snow and all like that. And it's what do you think about what Cleveland's doing?
With the roof they're putting in, or the dome? Yeah, I don't like I think elements should be a factor in football. It's what makes it unique compared to, obviously, basketball and baseball can play in elements, but obviously they're playing during the summer where and they're not playing in the rain, all that kind of stuff. So I think football was meant to be played outside, and I appreciate teams like Pittsburgh that still, I think, have that mentality.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're taking away a charming element of the game.
And
But
for Pittsburgh, it can also come in and be viewed as home field advantage when
mhm,
Miami comes, and are they equipped to play in the cold and elements that they're not accustomed to? That can certainly work in Pittsburgh's favor.
right, agreed.
So I think, but do you think Pittsburgh, they're not building a new stadium anytime soon? Is that your read on
Yeah,
the situation?
that's my read on it. Yeah.
I think the plan, and I'm just kind of, again, I'm a little over my skis here. I saw Fittipaldo make a mention in this chat that I think the UPMC, the practice facility lease, is also up in 2030. And so my guess is they're going to probably either do a big renovation for the practice facility or build a new practice facility entirely, because the space they have right now is pretty small and it's pretty low end compared to other NFL teams. It's not very modern, and the kind of the plot of land they have there is pretty small. It's right next to railroad tracks, and it's just not a lot of room to kind of expand. So I wonder if they're going to try to just move somewhere else and have a new location for the practice facility. Obviously, that'd be a big undertaking, but that would be a reason to not also try to build a new stadium at the same time, which, of course, those wheels would have to come in motion before the lease is up in 2030. So they're probably going to take this decade to build a new practice facility, and then maybe 10, 15 years from now, work on building a new stadium.
All right. All right. Anything else from either of those pressers?
Well, I mean, as you mentioned, it seems inevitable, as we agree. I think every fan agrees 18 games will happen at some point, but it may not happen as quickly as we thought. It sounds like it's still going to be 17 games for next year, and then we'll kind of take it from there, but it may not even be until the end of the decade with the new CBA where you have an 18-game season. Obviously, the NFLPA has undergone a lot of changing with their directors and executives. They have an interim director right now, so they're not probably in a position to bargain that hard. And so it does seem like 18 games will be on the back burner for at least one more year.
This current CBA runs through what? 29 or 30?
I believe it's one of the two. I don't know the exact date on that, but thereabouts.
2030. Yeah.
2030. Okay. So you may not get 18 games until then. I think the NFL still would like to have it sooner than later, but it does not sound like it. Even Goodell sort of hinted at this. They're not rushing into it for 2027. So I would still expect 17 games in 2027
All right.
or 2026.
And when they get and look, the players obviously don't like playing on Thursday. I think that's evident. Do you think we will get away from Thursday games, or do you think there's too much money? Do you think that's going to be a key sticking point in
No, Thursday games are staying. The prime deal's done. I don't know how long that runs for, but it runs for a while. There's no way. The NFL is not going to start reducing days of the week in which they play. They're going to expand, if anything.
What they're going to have to do then, probably as part of this 18-game season, is each team, I'm guessing, would have a Thursday night game, and then their bye would probably be before it, right? Because if you play on a previous, let's say, Sunday, you don't want them playing that previous Thursday, so it would make sense to maybe have a bye week after their Thursday night game to give them extra time to recover for the next supposed Sunday or Monday night game.
But you get the mini bye from the Thursday to the next week, so I don't know if you need another bye week on top of that, I don't know. I think the NFL maybe won't make any big changes in terms of
Well,
that.
the biggest thing is playing from, let's say, Sunday to Thursday, right?
Yeah, it's a really tight turnaround, and players understandably do not like doing that. And coaches, I'm sure, don't like doing it too, because the game planning becomes super condensed, and it's hard to do. I mean, could you put a bye week in front of that and go Sunday, bye week, Thursday game? Maybe you could do that instead.
All right. Well, that's something that's going to obviously be a talking point because players obviously don't like it, and they're going to have to probably do something to, I don't know, maybe like I said, maybe put I get your point about having uh the extended days off, a mini bye week, but that should be part of it, and then throw in throw in another bye week later on in the season for all teams.
Yeah, I don't know if they're gonna get their wish on the Thursday flexibility. It just may be the 2 bye weeks to come in. I mean, it could be because obviously NFL is doing the international trips, and basically every team's gonna be doing international trips, if not every year, every other year. So you're gonna get your bye week for the international game the week after that, then probably your bye week at some other point later or earlier in the season is probably how they're gonna do it, assuming they do 2 bye weeks, which they should if they're gonna expand to 18 games.
And as far as, I mean, I think it's obvious that at some point every team's going to play at least one international game during a regular season, uh, and I guess potentially even get to a point where you're seeing 2 of those.
I mean, you're already seeing that now, seeing teams, what Minnesota played back-to-back international games this year, I think, for the first time ever. So I think it's going to be a requirement where teams are going to be playing at least one. I think the NFL's vision is probably get this thing up to 16 international games a year, so 32 teams playing in that. I think they're going to be at 9 for 2026, and we should mention, I'd take a pretty good guess, and I'd bet your house on this, Dave, that Pittsburgh will be playing in Mexico City in 2027. NFL announcing a 3-year series in Mexico City beginning this year. Pittsburgh, I don't think will be one of those teams this year. I think San Francisco's going to host, and they're not on the schedule, and Pittsburgh's not going to host because they only have 8 home games this year. So I think 2027 makes a lot of sense when Pittsburgh will host an international game in Mexico City.
All right, and I think early speculation is that could potentially be Seattle, right?
Yeah, I think somebody said just kind of it makes sense there because Seattle's come out to Pittsburgh for a bunch of seasons in a row, including this past year, upsetting or beating Pittsburgh in the home opener. So that would make sense, but I haven't thought about the opponent
Yeah.
too much. I just think Pittsburgh in 27 because there's a big, obviously huge fan base down there in Mexico. Steelers one of the most popular teams, but they've kind of been trying to do this for several years now.
But the
I think
renovations of Azteca or something like that, right?
yeah, the one year there was stadium renovations. I think maybe COVID also was a factor. The one year just hasn't, they haven't played in Mexico City since 2022. So just hasn't kind of come together yet. But I think 27 will probably be that year because Pittsburgh will have the 9 home games. They'll give up the 1 and still have 8 home games in Pittsburgh, the 9th in Mexico City, the way they did in Dublin this year. And it just kind of makes a lot of sense.
All right. All right. That should wrap up the Super Bowl pressers.
Dave, just one other note here. I thought there was a little nugget from Ray Fittipaldo yesterday in his chat with the Post-Gazette on rookie cornerback Dante Kent, whose entire rookie season was lost from injury. He hurt his ankle in training camp, missed the entire preseason, began the year on IR, returned to practice and had his window open in early December, practiced once, got hurt again, had his window closed. The team announced Kent would be out for the season with a knee injury. We now know what that knee injury was. Per Fittipaldo, it was a torn ACL, so a major, severe knee injury for Kent. Really sucks for him. He'll be working his way back, but that's a guy that's going to be in a race to even be ready by training camp. And for a rookie with a lost, first year under new coaching staff, that is a big uphill battle to fight.
Yeah, you put him in a category now, sort of a Corey Trice Jr., right?
Yeah, the history isn't there of Trice, but it's still an ACL injury for a young cornerback, and could he be a pup guy to start training camp? Probably seems like a good candidate for that. So, we'll see. Guys return from ACLs quicker than ever before, but to suffer it in December, which is obviously pretty late, that's just going to be tough. So we got clarity. This is not a new injury, to be clear. This was what happened in December, and I believe it happened during one of the indoor practices on that turf field. So again, turf and the issues with knee injuries continue to be connected, but Kent's going to be in some trouble here.
All right.
All right, Dave, we're let's talk about this one. I don't even know how to intro this one. I know it's an annoying topic, but we need to discuss it because it is still relevant news, annoying as it may be. The Lions fan, Ryan Kennedy, involved in the Week 16 altercation with Pittsburgh Steelers receiver DK Metcalf, is now suing DK Metcalf, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and a couple other people and entities for $100 million, accusing them of defamation. And that comes from Chad Johnson, who's included in this lawsuit, going on the Nightcap podcast, that said that DK Metcalf told Johnson that the fan Ryan Kennedy called Metcalf the N-word and other slurs in language. And, the fan had held a press conference in December telling DK to apologize and recant comments, otherwise he would sue. And now the lawsuit is officially here. I believe Kennedy is holding another press conference today to probably just say the same thing. So that's where things are at, suing a bunch of people, including Metcalf in Pittsburgh, for $100 million.
All right. Much to the disappointment of my parents, they found out at an early age I probably was not going to be a lawyer, especially when I was biting on electrical cords as a toddler.
It's usually a good sign.
They probably were aiming for anything higher than a ditch digger at that point. But,
and you've achieved it, so
I think I have. I think I have slightly achieved that level. So apologies to them. But my I'm not a lawyer. I occasionally like being a groin specialist. I try to play one on Twitter here and there. I've become a pretty good groin specialist over the years. I don't know where that will get me. The $100 million, I think he'd be lucky to get $100, to be honest with you. And in fact, I would say if you don't, here's a crisp $100 bill signed by DK Metcalf. Go away unless you want any countersuits or anything along those lines. You got your 15 minutes of fame. Go get on OnlyFans or whatever you need to do with that. But man, it sounds like, it feels like you got a lot of hearsay there because you got Chad Johnson saying what he claims DK Metcalf told him. DK hasn't even commented, I don't think, on this at all. Other than I think, it being out there that this is a guy that he's had issues with in the past, I guess with Seattle and all like that. How this, this guy feels like has brought a lot of it on himself. And now look, should DK have done what DK had done or did, swiping at him or whatever? No. As far as I know, there's no criminal charges involved in this, right?
Right.
But yet this guy is suing Metcalf, the Steelers, Chad Johnson, the media company, I guess, that does business with the volume platform, and then Ford Field Management, obviously where the incident took place. Good luck getting any money out of those guys. Now, could this be a situation where it's give them $20,000 to go away? I suppose, but man, if you let people like this willy-nilly, and once again, I'm not, I'm not excusing what DK Metcalf did, but you to me, you're going to open up a Pandora's box type situation if this thing goes far. I don't know how any judge, based on kind of what we know, which is obviously exterior, removed a few times. I just don't see how this guy has any grounds for getting coming up with $100 million defamation lawsuit here.
Yeah, it's a clear cash grab. I think we can see through that pretty transparently. I think the goal would be you can get them to settle for some fraction of that cost. Like you said, $100,000, $20,000. But Pittsburgh should not, or Metcalf, no one should settle with this guy for a single penny. I know legal fees can rack up, and it's going to be super expensive to litigate this. It's just how these things go, and it takes a long time, and it's super annoying. But no, don't settle with this guy. Don't let him feel like he gets a win at all. As you said, we are not lawyers. Maybe Mike Floyer will talk about it. I think Ross McCorkle.
You're smarter than I am, so you could probably give better analysis than I am on the law aspect of it.
not by much. And our Ross McCorkle, I believe, was speaking to an attorney that he knows to maybe shed some light on just the general, does this guy have a case? What could this case look like? What needs to be proven? All those kinds of things. And I'm thinking way back to college journalism classes, because this did come up about defamation, and that is something obviously journalists have to be aware of. He'll be considered a private figure. Ryan Kennedy is. You have public figures and private figures, and there's a higher standard for defamation against a public figure than a private figure. So from that standpoint, it could be easier for Kennedy to make his case. I think with a private or with a public figure, you have to prove malice, like there was like reckless, not even reckless, but like true intent to defame somebody. With a private figure, I think it's just negligence where you just were incorrect about it, even if you had no malicious intent behind it. So in that sense, it could, again, be easier for Kennedy to win the case. But I think the point that you made, I think one really important point, is DK Metcalf has not made a public comment about Ryan Kennedy. So how do you defame somebody without making a public statement about what he said? The theory is he said it to Chad Johnson, who then by proxy went on his podcast and then relayed that information, but that didn't come from Metcalf, directly. And so how do you sue Metcalf for that? How is Pittsburgh, how is the Steelers themselves involved in this? I don't understand that, because as you said, I don't believe there's any lawsuit about allowing Metcalf to go over and interact with him and put his hands on him, that it's truly about the defamation aspect of it. So I don't know how the Steelers themselves kind of get roped into this, but of course you can sue anyone you want. Doesn't mean it's going to go anywhere. So, I wouldn't expect them to win this one, but I guess we'll just have to unfortunately follow this case as it drags on. I think there'll be a status conference in May as the next point in this case.
Didn't James Harrison comment on this as well too?
He did, and he was not named in the lawsuit, which may be intentional about. No one wants to make James Harrison.
How about this? We award you $1,000, but you got to go over to James Harrison's house to go pick it up.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, James Harrison comes to your house directly and gives you the check. So again, I think whenever Ross has an interview, which I believe we'll be posting sometime later this week, check that out. I'll be checking it out too to kind of get a true expert's opinion on how this works. But again, I think it's a pretty faulty case, and I would expect Kennedy to lose, but we'll see how the court system plays this thing out.
All right, let me quantify what I said. You're book smarter than me. I'm street smarter than you.
Oh yes, yeah. That's a low bar to clear, but you definitely have that over me. I'm not going to do well in the zombie apocalypse. I think Dave will end up ruling a small city of people in a zombie apocalypse.
I think I'd outlive you. I don't know if I can outrun you, but yeah.
I thought about this. I know where I'll die in the zombie apocalypse. I'll be the first to die, but not even like the first of the apocalypse. I'll be the guy that gets killed on the news report of somebody getting killed before the apocalypse is even really happening, where like somebody's on a city bus and like here's to reads a paper about someone drugged up guy that ends up murdering some guy. That's kind of the first sign of the zombie apocalypse. I'm the guy that gets murdered by the first death. That's definitely gonna be me.
What part of that would I die in?
Oh, again, you're going to be ruling. I think you'll rule a small city of people for a while, but they'll probably eventually mutiny against you and take you out. So that's kind of my viewpoint on your longevity.
I got you. All right.
All right. Hard left here into give some reader emails today we want to get to. But before we do that, I want to again hear from our friends over at MyBookie. And just one other add-on. I believe the documentary that Mike Tomlin is starring in, The Object of the Game, is premiering, at least maybe one part of it, tonight on Amazon Prime. So we'll hear from Mike Tomlin in that documentary. But before we do all of that, Dave, let's hear from our friends over at MyBookie.
That's right, Alex. As people know by now, MyBookie has been a long-time sponsor of the Terrible Podcast, especially in season and especially on Fridays when we pick all of the games of each week against the spread. And now with the Super Bowl ahead of us here, they've been sponsoring the show 3 times a week. And with the Super Bowl now finally here, MyBookie is where you turn bets into a nice sizable bank bankroll. Everybody's watching. Everybody's got a take. And this is the one game where the props matter just as much as the score does. That's why I use my bookie, and you should as well too. Their Super Bowl prop board is deep and fun to play. It's the same reason they get talked about on Jimmy Kimmel Live every year when the game rolls around. If there was ever a time to get in the game with my bookie, it's right now. And look, not only do they have a great Super Bowl props board, they have NHL lines, NBA lines, college basketball lines, anything sports related you can probably bet on at my bookie. One account, one wallet. You can bet the spread, live bet the second half, hit the casino that they have on site during the commercials. It all lives in one place under one roof at my bookie. Now, if you're a new user, go to mybookie.ag right now. Use our promo code TERRIBLE and get your first bet covered up to $500. If that bet does not hit, just simply use your bet back bonus token they give you and you can run it back again. Don't just watch the big game on Sunday. Make it pay with MyBookie. And of course, go there, mybookie.ag. Use promo code TERRIBLE at sign up to take advantage of their bet back bonus token. And like all great sites, they have an app that makes it even easier that you should be able to download on both platforms there. So thanks to MyBookie.ag, and we'll be talking about them one more time on Friday when we preview and pick the game against the spread for Super Bowl 60.
I'm excited to make our picks for Friday. I truly don't know which way you're leaning in terms of who you're going to pick, any sort of MVP. I really think you could go in different directions because this thing does feel pretty open. Seattle's certainly a favorite and good reason for it, but this game could be close, could be exciting, and so excited to talk about it with you on Friday. So appreciate MyBookie for their continued sponsorship of the podcast.
All right. And right now on MyBookie, the line that they have for Super Bowl 60 is the Seahawks favored by 5 points. They've got an over-under total of 45.5. And we'll pick a couple of the props, I imagine, like we always do on the Friday show ahead of the Super Bowl.
All right. Good deal. Dave, let's get to some reader emails and close out today's show.
All right. We shall. Let me pull up. Let's see. Let's get one from Mike Shorter here. He says, Alex and Dave, do you have any insight into the difference in coaching philosophy of James Campen versus outgoing offensive line coach Pat Meyer?
That's on my agenda to try to dig into Campen's philosophy. I imagine it's going to be much different from Pat Meyer, at least in pass sets, which is how I was best versed in what Meyer taught from one of the coaching clinics he did not too long ago. At least we talked about that after the hire. I assume the really aggressive sort of on-body, off-body pass sets will no longer be a thing. And that'll be an adjustment for this offensive line to probably do something pretty different. So I don't know exactly what Campen's philosophy is. I need to dig into it, but I assume that's going to be a pretty big difference there with no longer those kind of real aggressive, don't give up any sort of ground, which was sort of Meyer's philosophy on pass pro. It's probably going to be a little more, I don't want to say relaxed, but just different in the footwork under James Campen, but I got to research his background a bit more.
All right. I would agree there. I've got to do a deeper dive into that. See if I can get into some coaching clinics or further we get into the off season here. I got another email from Randy Hunt. Good thing his name isn't Mike Hunt.
All right.
It's funny. First thing when I thought of, this was, I think, even before your time. You don't remember the old VH1 show Bands on the Run, do you?
I do not.
All right. When was Bands on? When did I think it was in the late 1990s, early 2000s. VH1 had a reality show of Bands on the Run where they'd follow around all these up and coming bands. Well, they had this all female band, and they were actually pretty good, called Harlow, and they had a song entitled Mike Hunt.
Look at them now, but they didn't do anything after that.
Yeah. But I don't know what cause me to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah,
But
let's get to the next email.
Randy Hunt writes up, what's up, DNA? I recruited a new listener for y'all. I happen to be getting on the same flight as one Mr. Chidi Awoma.
Hey.
I said hi real quick, but told him his name still comes up from time to time on the terrible podcast because of his special teams prowess. He chuckled and said he'll have to check it out. So he says, Randy says, I'll send you my Zelle information for a commission of the new listener there. All right, that's great to hear, and we follow Chidi around every off season, don't we?
Yeah, metaphorically, as in his scouting, because he's an area scout, usually out west for Pittsburgh. So very cool, Randy. Thank you very much. We'll gladly send the check on over to you. So appreciate the email. That's a cool story. Yeah, big Cheaty fans over here for what he did in Pittsburgh. He's got helped bring Pittsburgh one of those rings, and as Pittsburgh looks for their seventh. So yeah, that's a really cool story. Appreciate that, Randy.
All right. Paul Lutz writes in. I have no play on the name there, so thankfully.
You accidentally called him Mike a second ago when you're reading that email. And also, I like Randy said, he said DNA. That's Dave and Alex. I like that. That's a fun little
there you go.
name for us.
That will be our alternative podcast in later dates here. The DNA show. There you go. I don't know what that's going to look like come the time. Post Steelers Depot life, whatever that looks like. All right, Paul Lutz writes in, hello, gentlemen. I have a question about the left guard position. Before the coaching staff change, it sounded as though Spencer Anderson was going to have a shot to be the left guard this coming season. Do you see that changing at all? And if so, who could replace him? He says there's a lot of buzz in the draft this year about Jennings Dunker. I know in college he played right tackle. However, he has been working at tackle and guard in the preseason process. If he's available in the second round, could you see the Steelers taking a swing on him to play the left side? As always, keep up the great work, and thank you for taking the question. I know a little about Jennings Dunker now at this point due to the Senior Bowl coverage that we had and just getting into some of these prospects now at this point. I do know that although he did play primarily, I believe, at right tackle during his college career, a lot of people think he's going to have to move to guard at the next level. I do think, remember him playing limited, I think, right guard during his college career, but I think he's mostly been a right side guy. It would make sense on everything that I know about him so far that he does move to guard. I think there would obviously be, is this a guy that you would want at right guard? Is he a guy that you would want at left guard? Could he make the transition, obviously, from one side to the other? I think he's going to be attractive in the fact that it does seem like, he could be a guy that could have, in a pinch, play kick back outside to right tackle for some teams. Within that, he does feel like a second to third rounder right now at this point. I guess when it comes to the Steelers specifically, if this guy ended up in a Steelers uniform, and by the way, he is an Iowa product. He is a fifth-year senior, I believe. I think 6'4", 7'8", 320 pounds. 34-inch arms, I think, something like that on the Senior Bowl. Let me see if I got some of the Senior Bowl measurements on him. What is his arms? 34 even on the arms. Some nice hands at 10-inch there, but I think his official measurement as far as height came in at 6'4" and 7/8. All right, where am I going with this? If you did end up being a guy that the Steelers drafted, I think one thing that you consider, obviously, I do think he's headed towards kicking inside at guard at the NFL level. Could you potentially get him in at right guard and flip Mason McCormick over to left guard? I think a lot of people forget, even though Mason McCormick has represented himself, fairly well, I think would be the qualification at right guard in the NFL. This is a guy that predominantly, and I mean, it was a landslide, played a majority of the snaps at left guard in college, right? So could you get into a situation if you drafted, you know, in this case, this particular player, could he come in and, fit in at right guard? And you think about moving Mason McCormick over to left guard. I think that's plausible.
It is, although I'd prefer to keep McCormick at right guard because he has played well, and to keep him and Fautanu and kind of that right side of the line, working Frazier, McCormick, Fautanu as a continued in the continuity of that trio together than trying to flip pieces around. That'd be my preference. I don't know a ton about Jennings Dunker. I know he certainly has the look of an offensive lineman. He's got the mustache, the mullet, certainly has that kind of throwback look that's attractive, kind of that Quinn Miners type of feel. Did he play more guard at the Senior Bowl? Probably a good question for Ross McCorkle whenever we get him on the show to recap what happened in Mobile. So what is the reason why people are projecting him inside? If he has 34+ inch arms, that's tackle length. Is it the lack of height? Is this kind of a Fautanu thing where the build is 6'4", so shorter than your average tackle, but the arm length is good? Because the arm length is what matters most. There's still a debate about how much that truly matters at all.
I think the mobility aspect of his game
Okay.
on the outside is the thing that's one of the bugaboos with him.
Okay, fair enough. So yeah, if it's an athleticism issue, then that may be the reason why. But the size certainly seems to be good enough to play offensive tackle. So yeah, you're right. Mike Tomlin had mentioned that and floated that Spencer Anderson, a candidate to potentially do more than just be the 6 offensive lineman in the future. And now with the new coaching staff, that's a clean slate there. So the first thing is to say, Malu, come back. I'm going to guess no, he does not return. I think for reasons I stated before, his age, the guard market, some of the soft tissue injuries that he had. You're probably going to draft because the free agent or the free agent pool is typically pretty poor and pretty expensive. There's that big O-line tax out there. So with 12 draft picks, you probably draft somebody. Where exactly does that come in? Could that be a second round pick? It's possible. I think probably a little bit later than that, it's a little more likely, but it's all on the table right now. So you probably have one of those 3 third-round picks that you have, and probably Anderson competing for a left guard spot come training camp.
All right, looks like in the all-star practices at the Senior Bowl, 50 practice snaps at right tackle, 29 at right guard, and then the actual game, 43 snaps at right tackle and 8 at right guard. So a right side player, the most of his snaps came at his more natural position at right tackle, but they did take a look at him, obviously some as a right guard. So he's going to be another one of those probably tweeners overall. The big question is how NFL teams see him surviving at his more natural position at the NFL level, which has been right tackle.
Yeah, and we'll have a report on him, I'm sure, sometime soon and kind of get our perspective, but I'm sure there'll be a split between some teams that view him as a potential tackle and some who want to kick him inside at guard.
All right, David McKee writes in on Roman Wilson. Great work as always. Can you guys tell me why even you are writing off Roman Wilson when Alex himself made a whole video about how good he was and how sorry you felt for him? My comp for Wilson out of school was Jordy Nelson, and he looks like he can be that good eventually. Am I crazy? Writes Dave M. Look, I mean, Alex in that video that he did, it was obviously limited reps and mostly coming in 2 games, I think, as a whole. There's still a lot of questions about Roman Wilson. Now, here's the good thing about Roman Wilson. He's getting a reset here with this new coaching staff, new wide receivers coach, everything that goes along with that. I think the most glaring thing is, and this might be Aaron Rodgers related, how much Aaron Rodgers likes working with younger players, and did he at some point during practices or games lose some faith or trust in Roman Wilson? That's a lot different than maybe skill set, the actual ability to separate. I think going back and remembering a lot of the film study that I did on Roman Wilson coming out of Michigan, which now is couple of years ago, obviously at this point, he was a guy that was on the move a lot, a guy that got a lot of free separation, a guy that you wondered at the NFL level how he would do against more press man coverage type situations. Now, there was obviously some college tape with him having success in such situations, but it was just few and far between. And I think that's still an area of his game is that still needs some deep looking into. Maybe you can comment on this, on some drills and all in training camp practices, but there's still a lot of questions outside of just a couple of games and some good separation on a couple of routes that need to be answered when it comes to Roman Wilson.
Yeah, I think the first thing is to comment on that point. There's a difference between kind of how I feel about a guy and how the team might feel about a guy. And so even if I like the guy more and the team doesn't or has reason to be skeptical, then that's all that really matters in terms of what the reality is, what his true standing with the team will be. And I thought he had some good tape. I thought there was some missed opportunities. He ran some good routes, but there's always stuff behind the scenes. Are you getting some of the checks and adjustments and being on the same page? And you could even see on tape some occasional lapses between Rodgers and Wilson. So the new coaching staff can cut both ways and can be a clean slate, but they're not attached to this guy at all. A guy with 12 catches in 2 years is not going to be somebody you hang your hat on if you're a new coaching staff. And if Rodgers comes back, then that may not be good news for Roman Wilson. You imagine this team's going to be making some pretty big additions. You probably assume they're going to bring in at least, they're going to make two notable moves at receiver this year. Is that a reasonable assumption to
Feels like it.
make? Whether that's draft or free agency or probably a combination of both. They're probably going to sign a free agent to a decent, probably level contract. We don't know exactly who and what that's going to be. They're going to probably draft somebody pretty early as well. So you have Metcalf, the two additions we'll assume. That puts Roman Wilson at best as your number 4. There could be more opportunities in 11 personnel based scheme, but still that's at best number 4 going into this thing and maybe even further behind without special teams value. That's going to hurt him under this new coaching staff. So, we'll see. You go into training camp and you see if this guy can step up and make plays and grow and develop and build upon a 2025 where he could play, unlike 2024 where he basically had no action, not really anything to build on. I still think he's a talented guy, but I understand the situation just could be working against him in reality.
Do you view him more as a slot guy still at this point?
No, I think he can play on the outside. I don't want to typecast him just because he's undersized as a slot guy. I'm probably will still have to work on releases and hands a little bit and continue to get stronger, but I think he can play inside and outside.
He out wide of the 253 snaps that he played last season. 205 of them were out wide, 48 of them in the slot.
Yeah, no, I think he can be an out wide guy for sure. So it just might be tough math, I think, will be the picture Roman Wilson is looking at. Just a quick side note, and I'll write the report here probably by the time we reconvene for Friday's show, and I've not officially put my thoughts together, but the guy that you mentioned, Omar Cooper Jr. from Indiana, I really like Omar Cooper. I think he's got some really good tape. The top end speed may not be there, but talk about a guy that can separate and run really good, consistent routes. Man, Omar Cooper's impressive.
He is a guy, too, that in college, I think predominantly in the slot, but he is another one that showed his worth that could play outside as well, too. And we just heard Mike McCarthy talk about, and as any head coach would probably ideally want to say, you'd like all your receivers to be able to play all 3 spots on the field. And I think he definitely in college showed at the various positions that he could do that. I think he could play in a slot. I think he could play X, and I think he could play the Z as well, too. So he is a very talented guy, and I don't think we'll see obviously as we get closer on into the combine and do deeper study on. I think his average depth of target and catch were very respectable. I think he's very good after the catch as well too. I think he's good footwork, good hands as a whole. And there's the link, obviously, while brief, to new wide receivers coach Adam Henry. I kind of view him as a second round, maybe early third round guy. So yeah, could this be a guy that the Steelers potentially target? I definitely say the answer is yes, based on his tape and links to the Steelers, and he seems to be a good character kid on top of everything.
Yeah, one of my early favorites of this draft cycle. So we'll talk about him more throughout, but wanted to note that.
All right. Let's see what else we have in the email machine here. Maybe that we didn't hit from. How about this a little bit longer from Bob Colley here, writes in, it's mostly died down for now, so maybe it's a good time to put a stake in the silliness that gripped a good portion of the Fire Tomlin crowd, specifically the delusion that the Steelers should tank so they could fail or fall into a top pick. draft a franchise quarterback and turn back into a perennial Super Bowl contender. This tank and turn idea that seems to have enthralled so many is a mirage, he says, with exceedingly rare, if any, exceptions. It just doesn't happen in the NFL. From 2000 to 2024, according to his research, 194 teams have finished with 11 or more losses. Of those, 23 managed 11 or more wins the following season. 5 of those made it to the conference championship or Super Bowl in that bounce back year. None of those 5 were able to stack another 11 plus win season or playoff appearance the year after that. Plus, none of those 5 had seen notable success prior to the tank and turn. 3 only averaged between 5 and 6 wins per year for the previous 5 seasons. The most successful 2 averaged 8.6 wins over the previous 5 years, barely 500. In other words, 2.5% of the 11 plus lost teams managed to post 11 plus wins the next year, but they had all spent the previous 5 years either well below or barely clearing the 500 mark. He says there are teams whose fortunes finally turned due to a great hire and or draft after a prolonged period of futility, but there's no such thing as tank and turn, according to Bob's research. Good research, Bob. What are your thoughts on the tank and turn method in the NFL?
Can you read back that top line number? He said there were 140 teams or so that had 11 plus losses. And then how many of those had 11 plus wins the following year?
All right. According to Bob, from 2000 to 2024, 194 teams have finished with 11 or more losses. Of those 194, 23 managed 11 or more wins the following season. 5 of those made it to the conference championship or Super Bowl in that bounce back year. He says none of the 5 were able to stack another 11 plus win season or playoff appearance after the year after that. Plus, none of those 5 had seen notable success prior to the tank and turn.
Well, I think just to start, 23 of 194 is what, 12%. That's not a number to completely ignore. I think that in itself is certainly a turn. Now, is it all the way from, terrible loser to Super Bowl champ? No, but that to me is still a tank and turn in the sense of you had a bad year and you turn this thing around, in pretty short order. And I think you can obviously point to examples of Houston and New England, obviously, and Washington as some recent sources of that. And it may not always be where you go from 11 losses to 11 wins. It may be where you, over a 2-year span, where you build this thing up pretty good. Look at Denver, 2022, 5 wins, 2023, 8 wins, 2024, 10 wins. And now, of course, 14 wins and number 1 seed in the AFC in 2025. So there may be a little more prolonged kind of turnarounds, but still very clear traction, regardless. I can appreciate a good counter narrative, and I think it's certainly, there's some validity that just because you tank doesn't mean you're going to automatically find success. And I think people underestimate how much it sucks to tank when you're tanking and how just futile everything feels, and there is no guarantee that you are going to turn this thing around. And how long is a tank? Is it just a 1-year turn and burn? It may be longer than that. I think it's kind of one point that the reader is making here, which is fair. But I think there's some validity to the idea that teams can turn around their franchise in relative short order. I think in recent years especially, that's kind of been evident.
Yeah, especially if you hit on a good draft class and have a good free agency.
And find the quarterback. It's usually the missing piece. And again, C.J. Stroud and Drake May and Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels are all examples. I mean, yeah, I know he's said of those 5 teams that went on to have the most success, they couldn't replicate that. What about the whole subset of the 23 who had 11 wins? Did they find consistency? And those 5 teams who didn't make the Super Bowl the next year or had a bad season, what was their long-term outlook? Did they bounce back after that? So it would require some more research. I think there's some good points to be made there, but I think there's also some still validity, and you can kind of feel that intuitively that teams can turn around their programs pretty quickly in this modern day.
Yeah, I agree. All right. I think that's all the new kind of fresh emails that we have here. We are, I don't know, hour 40 minutes into this. Time to wrap it up on this Wednesday. We'll talk on Friday about maybe even more official announcements on the coaching staff. Perhaps we'll have an OC by then, made officially official. The Super Bowl obviously coming up on Sunday. Start watching for Steelers Depot the next couple of days. We have our annual props contest. It's free for everybody to enter. Assuming you've been a commenter on the site in the past, win some cash prizes. I've got some of our very own Scott Brown's copies, 3 copies of the LeBeau book, Legendary, that I'm going to send out to prize winners in addition to cash this year as well too. And Alex and I will be talking about previewing the big game on Sunday, our picks against the spread, going over a few props and whatever other news transpires related to the Steelers by then. So if you got any comments or questions or whatnot, as always, send them to theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter @Steelers Depot. Follow Alex @Alex_Kozora. Follow the show @Terrible Podcast. Once again, email theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate, SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button, follow the directions that way, get a username and password, and hit the login button to take advantage of the ad-free version of the site. So until Friday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.